Day 9 of training camp for the New Orleans Saints is in the books, and it was a stinker for the offense. Is it time to panic? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu. And as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore, Scott Vicknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Saints continuing the three-man quarterback rotation, and this time around, it was Tyler Shough's chance to start. Fans were allowed at today's practice. I believe tomorrow's practice will also be open to the public from like around 9 to 11:20 in the morning. So great opportunity today for Tyler Shough to show what he can do and maybe kind of close the gap between him and Spencer Rattler, because as we mentioned for the last couple of days, Spencer Rattler is currently in the lead to be the starter. So far, I'd say that gap has not been closed yet. I would say that there are some good and some bad to talk about today. So let's start off with the good. Let's start off on a positive note. I would say Tyler Shough looks way more decisive with where he wants to go with the football today than he did a week ago, where you're trying to settle in and you're going against the ones. And even in a 7-on-7 drill, you kind of look hesitant and you're either not pulling the trigger or you're running out of bounds. And in a regular game, you take those safe plays, right? You want to minimize the risk. And, looking at Tyler Shough's last season of college football, I believe he only had 6 interceptions. So, he was good at minimizing the risk. And like I said, on a Sunday afternoon against a division rival, you'll take that. You'll take the safe plays. But in practice, you want to let it rip a little bit more. The previous one he did, hence the 2 interceptions. Today wasn't exactly a turnover-ridden practice, and I would say for Shough, there are some moments where you'll see him kind of just letting it rip over the middle of the field to Chris Olave, which is always a great sight to see because, A, you want to see Olave continue to feast against this defense, but you also want to see the quarterbacks find their favorite target, and you'd imagine that number 12 should be that. On the flip side, though, today was just not a good day for the offense yet again, and I think it is becoming very evident that if the Saints are going to be as bad as people say this year, I think a lot of it might come down to the fact that they don't know if they have their quarterback. Now, I've been very fair. I said I want to wait till these preseason games come around, and we are not far from it. We're 8 days away from the preseason opener against the Chargers. That is where, I don't want to say you jump to conclusions, but you start to get a little bit of a better idea of what this team will be able to do under center. Right now, it's just practicing against the same guys every single day, and that's not enough for me to say, oh, this team's going to stink, this team's going to surprise people, whatever it may be. But the bad days for the offense are starting to pile up a little bit. And I think a lot of that, at least from my opinion, comes from the fact that you don't know who your quarterback's going to be. You don't know if you have a definitive guy on the roster. And even today, the Saints did something they haven't done yet with that rotation. Although we know they've been going through Rattler, Shough, and Haener, just kind of rotating who be QB1, today was the first time that Rattler was QB3. I don't think that's a negative thing per se, because if you're not QB1 at this point, not to say the reps are meaningless, but it's not the same showcase. So whether it was QB2 or QB3, to me, I don't think it matters as much. The timing, though, was fascinating because yesterday it came out, Rattler spoke to Jory Epstein of Yahoo Sports, and he said, and I quote, "I feel like throughout camp, I've been the best quarterback on the field." Again, there's more to it. I could pull up the full thing real quick and just read what else Spencer Rattler had to say about his camp. But the timing's quite fascinating. So he said that he feels like he's the best quarterback on the field. I want to keep that going and keep showing the team, keep showing the guys, keep showing the coaches that I want to be that guy. Odd that then he goes to QB3. The timing's not great. But I would say for the Saints today, this is one of those days where just a slow offensive day. Some of it's by design. A very situational day for this offense. I think that's fine. You're still trying to get down the logistics of this Kellen Moore offense and how he wants it run. Fascinating enough, Kellen Moore did say that tomorrow is going to be way more up-tempo. It's going to be a scrimmage, so I think that's where we'll get a better understanding. And I'd say tomorrow's scrimmage, which will be open to the public, I think maybe we could get a little bit more out of this team in terms of how we feel about them. Right now, if you just tally up the days, the defense has been dominating most days. There's been some days where the offense has kind of bounced back and shown some fight. But I say today is another day that goes in the defense's favor. And again, I don't want to jump to a conclusion on August 2nd. It's way too early to get to where this team is and all that. But at some point, the offense is going to have to show its teeth. It's going to have to show some mettle, and it's going to have to be able to punch back on a more consistent rate. I know it's just training camp, but when you start to hear that, man, it's the defense winning a lot of these days in a row, you start to wonder, well, what happens when you do start that season and you open up that gauntlet where it's Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, Buffalo to open the first 4 weeks of the season? I mean, you could get your teeth kicked in super early. Again, don't want to jump to those conclusions, but you want to see some fight from this offense. So far, slow day for the offense. Not a lot going on. I think we'll learn a lot tomorrow with this Saints team when they scrimmage. So we'll go from there and we'll see what happens. And as I'm recording this right now, Kellen Moore is talking about Tyler Shough. So if he says anything of note, I'll add it here. Let's go with some negatives that aren't play related. Nick Saldavari out for the year. You know, a very, very brutal thing for him. Knee injury. He's going to miss the rest of the season. Shane Lemieux is going to come in. Had experience starting with the Saints last year. At this point, this is just a depth signing. You're just filling the gap here for the offensive line. Can't really complain about that. I would say for Nick Saldavari, it's further evidence that draft class, it just gets worse and worse. The 2023 draft class is one of those where when teams struggle, that's why. When you miss on so many picks, Brian Brzez's been a fine player. I can't knock Brian Brzez. Isiah Foskey, we don't even hear the fucking guy's name. Like, it's training camp. There are names I'm going to mention when I close it out with talking about who's trending up that are either guys that are like whatever or a rookie already. We never mentioned Isiah Foskey. So that was a whiff of a pick. Jake Haener, we'll see if he could be a perennial backup for this team. But right now, that seems to be a whiff. Kendra Miller, I think Kendra Miller's talented as all hell, but he's never healthy. Nick Saldavari, never healthy. So that's a tough injury. Unfortunate for him. Wasn't projected to be a starter, so it's not like you're like, oh man, you got to rearrange the offensive line. But you do lose some depth there. At least Shane Lemieux, though, familiar name for the Saints. So that's worth adding. Now, let me get into some positives because there's not a whole lot to get into today on the positive front. I would say, yeah, you got your usual plays from Olave here and there, but offensively, another weekday. Defensively, though, Ugo Amadi, arrow pointing up for him. He's trending up, in my opinion. That's why I mentioned before, you got names coming in that will have good practices, and I'm still waiting for Isiah Foskey. I'd say Ugo Amadi's kind of doing his thing. He's always been a very, very solid player for the Saints. Never really, going to impress you completely to the point where like, oh, this guy's got to get way more snaps. But since being on the Saints since 2023, I feel like he's one of those players when he needs to kind of fill that void and step on the field, he always makes plays. So arrow trending up for him. Probably the one that excites me the most, Jonas Sanker. It's starting to click for him. I've said it, so many times over this podcast, and I've tweeted about it a ton of times. No rookie excited me more than Jonas Sanker for the Saints. When the draft's over and, it's late at night, you're sitting there watching all these guys, their tape, you're watching their highlights, you're watching their interviews, you see now their coaches, their teammates talk about them. No one excited me more than Jonas Sanker. I always said, like, you watch him, fundamentally sound, cleans up everyone else's mess, at times can look like a heat-seeking missile. He's starting to feel comfortable. And he doesn't necessarily need to start week one. Obviously, Justin Reid is the guy for that Saints secondary, bringing him over from Kansas City. And you signed Julian Blackman over from Indy. I think Julian Blackman, if he has to start today, could. I think he's a very good player. But Jonas Sanker's starting to make a name for himself. And I do believe that this Saints safety group, which was a really weak position group the last couple seasons, I think this could be one of the strengths of this team, depending on his development. So the fact that we're talking about Jonas Sanker in this light where it is August 2nd, yeah, we haven't gone to a preseason game yet, but we're excited to talk about him and what he's been doing on the practice field. I think that bodes well for him. And he's one of those players, as we get closer to that preseason opener on August 10th, he's someone that I think you got to keep an eye on. Because how does he play in that environment? I would not be surprised if he has one of those preseasons where he lights it up and we're talking about, okay, this guy's got to be on the field, week one against the Cardinals to see what he can do. So arrow pointing up for Jonas Sanker. I would say that this rookie class for the Saints, we're going to see a whole lot of them. Obviously Kelvin Banks is the unquestioned left tackle for this team right now. And by the way, I think the fact that we aren't talking about Kelvin Banks, like, oh, he's struggling at practice, great sign. So Jonas Sanker, Kelvin Banks, I think we're going to see a little bit of Quincy Riley. He's already had 2 picks at camp. I think he's done his job. I talked about Danny Stutzman earlier this week and how he's played. So I would say that they've done a good job. And also, by the way, before I move on from Jonas Sanker stuff, something pretty cool today. While he was speaking to the media, he had Julian Blackman and Justin Reid like kind of hanging over his shoulder. The fact that this kid's going to have 2 vets who are A, great leaders, and B, just great playmakers around him to kind of show him the ropes. And we know Justin Reid's going to be here for the next 3 years. Blackman, we'll see what happens with Julian Blackman in his contract situation. He's only on a 1-year deal. Yeah, I think this is the perfect situation for him. The perfect situation. So we'll see what happens, but the fact that Jonas Sanker is trending up, that makes me very happy. Yeah, I really liked when the Saints picked him, and I'd love to see him make an immediate impact. So for today, I'm just going to go with Sanker and Ugo Amadi as the guys that are trending up right now. I think the Saints still have a lot of work to do, but look, we've talked about other players on this defense before. I've already talked about in terms of trending up, giving credit to Chase Young. I've given credit to Carl Granderson, Danny Stutzman, Quincy Riley, Kool-Aid McKinstry. So today, show a little bit of love to that safety room with Sanker and Ugo. So shout out to them and how they played today at practice. I think tomorrow is another great opportunity with a scrimmage for them to kind of stackpile good days, which the Saints offense, unfortunately, has not done yet. So final takeaway for day 9. Saints got to figure out what the fuck to do offensively, because right now it's not working. So either you have to start changing that rotation and getting it down to 2 quarterbacks, because I don't know how consistent you can be offensively when you're rotating 3 quarterbacks. And I think that's kind of the question right now. This isn't me to question Kellen Moore. Love the energy Kellen Moore's bringing. I think Kellen Moore is a fascinating offensive-minded coach. I do wonder, though, right, when you start to have this 3-man rotation and you are getting into day 9, tomorrow's going to be day 10 at training camp, does that start to mess with the flow? Is it hard to gain any rhythm when you're rotating quarterbacks in and out at this level, as opposed to maybe making it just a 2-man race or even having a starter that you're declaring from now? So I think that's a question that I have. It doesn't mean it's a question of Kellen Moore. It's just from an outside perspective. I do wonder if that is part of the problem, or if the problem is the Saints just don't have their quarterback right now. But the current struggle and concern has to be that quarterback room and whether or not they can start to stockpile good days, because it feels like right now the defense is dominating training camp, which is great for Staley and those boys. But for us fans who want to see this offense start to revitalize themselves and see the Saints play at a high level in that dome, it's hard to get confidence when you see the lack of consistency under center. So we'll see what happens in New Orleans. Still plenty of time for them to figure it out, and tomorrow is a great opportunity for the offense to bounce back. So we'll see what happens when they have that open practice again, which will be a scrimmage. And of course, as always, guys, we'll have you covered here. So let us know your thoughts as always. Who's impressing you? What are you concerned about? What are your thoughts on the quarterback situation? Do you think it's time to scale it back from a 3-man rotation? Let us know in the comment section below. And as always, make sure to subscribe so you get more here from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.